Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, as the case may be, and welcome to this third week of the Maestro 11 webinar series. As Dan said, my name is Quentin McDonald. I'm the Maestro Product Manager, and I'm been working along with my colleagues on Maestro 11 for some time now, and we're very pleased to be able to take this opportunity to show you some of the features that we've been thinking about so intently over the last few years. This series of webinars is designed each week to highlight a particular area of the new version of Maestro, which is currently in beta. And we're going to provide a demonstration of some of the tools that are related to a specific area. Each of the webinars is going to be posted on the Schrodinger website, along with some notes and even additional training videos that are provided by the Maestro team. And also, we've been working with our education team and our marketing teams to try and present things in a way that we hope will be very concise but informative. So we've had an introduction to Maestro as a whole, and last week Robert Slattery went through styling within the workspace. This week we're going to look at the tools menu. The task menu is how you really do stuff in Maestro. It's really where the meat of Maestro is. It's also been an area where there's been a certain amount of confusion amongst our beta testers. And so I think it's a useful opportunity for us to reiterate some of our thinking and to show some of the really cool features that we have in Maestro. So without further ado, let me start. When we were thinking of Maestro 11, one of our largest challenges, one of the biggest things that we had to deal with, was the fact that Schrodinger has a huge number and range of computational tools. These go from things like small molecule quantum mechanics right up to protein crystallography, from cheminformatics through to biologics and now material science. So this impacts on every aspect of the design of Maestro 11, but probably no single area is affected more greatly than the interface that we have to all these individual tools. In the past, if we look now at Maestro 11, in the past we had a couple of menus that were at the top. We had a tools menu and we had a tasks menu or an applications view, depending on your settings. We also had a task tree that could be presented in the workspace. So that was in the previous version of Maestro, and we've actually done away with these. And you can see that there is no such menu. And as I said, one of the things that a number of our beta testers have asked about is, where is my favorite feature? Where is the tool that I used to use? When we were first starting to talk about Maestro 11, I tried to provide reassurance to people that during the design process we would not change the main menu bar very substantially. It turned out we really couldn't keep to that. But I hope that the changes that we have done are for the best, and you'll see by the end of this webinar what our thinking was, and also how best to use these tools. We have about 100 top-level interfaces to our various scientific applications. So there's a lot of stuff to present, and it can be very intimidating, I think, for the first-time user, or even for people that are moving into a new area within the use of Maestro. One of the ways that we decided to think about this was that, recognizing that most of us now are accustomed to Google and to similar interfaces, that search was going to be very important. Once you get up to the sort of 100 type things, it's quite hard to browse. We do still provide a categorization, which I'll show in a moment, but our thinking was that search is likely to be very important. And along with that, recognizing that even though we might have, say, 100 separate possible calculations, and actually when you add the tools, it's probably more like 150, there are for any given user, there's likely to be only a small subset of those which are used at any given time. So let me start with some concrete examples. The button that we're going to focus on today is on the top right. It's known as Tasks. We wanted it to be on the right, sort of on its own, or at least in a recognizable place because of its key place in the Maestro interface. This is really a go-to button, especially once, as we saw last week, you've done your styling and you've got the molecule the way you want, and you want to calculate now something on it. So there's several ways that the task tool can work. The most direct way is to pop it up, and you notice there's this browse button here. The browse opens quite a large panel which is categorized in two different ways. On the right, there is an area which is labeled applications. Traditionally within Maestro, we've had we've used these product names for our various features. So many of you will be familiar with, say, Jaguar for quantum mechanics, or macromodels for small molecule conformational analysis, and Prime for homology modeling, and so on. We decided that it would be short-sighted not to continue to use these names for their corresponding products. But at the same time, when people first come to Maestro, or when they're moving into a new area of application, they're not necessarily going to always understand the product name. And some people have trouble remembering it, whatever. So if you look on the left, there's a large area which categorizes everything by its task. This is a more abstract definition. For example, instead of saying Jaguar, we might say quantum mechanics. We'll see in a moment that there's another advantage with this categorization as well. The other thing I will say is that we've mentioned a couple of times or described Maestro 11 as a beta. And it is a beta. There are things that are still incomplete and not working as smoothly as we would like. And one of the areas that we're still working on is this categorization. We feel that we probably can do better with this. This was a good first attempt, but it's still quite large and quite intimidating. So we're hoping that we will be able to break this task area down into something that's a little less intimidating and perhaps more intuitive to people. But as I said, it's a good start, and it's certainly, we think, better than anything we've had in the past. So let's look at some of the features of this pane. If, for example, I'm a glide person, I always go to glide, then I can just double click on that and I get a smaller pane that has the glide type tasks in it. If I want to go back, there's an arrow to go back. So at any given time, I can just sort of dive down into lower levels and I'll find my way, I can find my way around like that. You can see there's a little arrow on the left which indicates whether there's going to be a sub area. So, for example, materials has a sub menu. I can get back to that if I want. Whereas some of the others, like ligand preparation, the ... they just bring up a panel straight away. So if I click on ligand preparation, I get straight to lig prep. A couple of points I want to make about the panels themselves at this point. Firstly, you'll notice if you're familiar with ligand preparation or any of the tools, that pretty much all of them are the same as they were in previous versions. And an important point is that not only do they work the same, but the results should be the same. So nothing that we have done in Maestro 11 is really going to change the application interfaces or certainly the numerical results. So Maestro 11 is all about usability. We felt, based on feedback from the users, that many of these panels, not only were they familiar to the users, but they were also things that people found that they could navigate reasonably well. Some of them require a little bit of specialist knowledge about the task. You need to understand at least the task that you're doing. And there may be things, cosmetic things that we can do and improve in subsequent versions, but we don't expect that we'll see major changes in these types of panels. Let me go back to the task tool. As I said, this is still a work in progress, and we will likely recategorize some of these to make it a little less intimidating and try and make the categorizations more natural. Unfortunately, everyone has their own different concept about how things should work, and within that recognition, we have a number of tools for customization that I'll show you in a moment. While we're here, let me point out how you would search this tool. And as I said, one of the key aspects of Maestro 11 with Task Tool and Maestro 11 is that we wanted to make it searchable. And if I go back to the task button, I'll pop it up and you see that there is a search field right here with a little magnifying glass. What I can do is search, say, for ligand. Now, what happens here is that as I type, I get a few suggestions. This is not the complete search. This is just a few suggestions that maybe are things that we think should be of interest to you. But you can carry on and type in any word you want, and we'll do our best to try and find them within the list of tasks. But in this case, I happen to know that there is ligand preparation. I type that, and I bring it up, and here I have a ligand preparation with only one result. Let me contrast that, say, for example, if I go for docking. If I choose docking, then we have a number of docking-related programs. I want to say a few things about the way these results are presented and how we've calculated them. This is actually not just a simple search. It's actually a curated search. So what we've done is we've tried to figure out if someone searches for docking, what are they most likely to be looking for? And in that way, it's a little bit like a page ranking in Google. So we've gone through, and all our application scientists and all our internal users have gone through and nominated what they think are, what for maybe several hundred search terms, what people are most likely to be looking for. And we think, given that, for many users, ligand docking through glide is what Schrodinger was all about, then we figured that that should be the number one hit. And of course, closely related to that is the grid generation. But there are also other types of docking, and we've tried to rank them in order of things that we think, from the most common tools to things that maybe are starting to be post-docking analysis programs. Once I have the search results, I can just click and go straight to the panel. So we think the search is going to be very powerful. Again, it's still something we're refining. We're adding more keywords all the time, and we're going to make it clearer to users what's actually happening when you're searching. There's been a little bit of confusion that some people have thought that if I type, for example, if I type docking, some people have felt that this may have been the only results we have available in terms. It's not actually, because I can still just type doc and get these, but I could type some other substring and still get a search result. We always do a text-based search as well. It's not totally keyword-based. One of the things I mentioned at the start was that we recognized that only most users only use a subset of all our offerings. So with that in mind, we've put in a couple of tools that we think are going to make it a lot easier for people. The first is that, in common with a lot of programs now, we've decided to add essentially a recently accessed list. So you can see during the session, these are a couple of things that that I have accessed during the session. When I quit Maestro and come back, these will still be here. I'd actually started with a clear settings just for clarity. But basically, when I start, next time I start Maestro 11, these will still be in this menu. And so this was one of the key strategies that we had in terms of thinking about making it faster and easier for people. We've certainly added search, we've made a browsable category, but we recognize that you're probably not going to want to navigate through that every time just to find your commonly used tasks. And one of the simplest way of doing it, doesn't require any intervention on the part of the user, is just to show them the things that they used last time. And this list will grow up to a certain limit. Eventually we'll have ways of removing items for it if you wish. But we expect that a lot of the time, as you use Maestro 11, as you do your tasks, you'll build up a natural list of things that will just keep propagating, reordering as you naturally use it. At the same time, that still requires a click up here and recognizing it. So we thought about another way of doing things, and that is the idea of favorites. The favorites toolbar is shown here. It's the little toolbar that's underneath the selection tools that we talked about last week. The selection tools are things that, the selection tools are the larger toolbar. Underneath you see the toolbar that says ligand preparation, finishes, and measure. These are the favorites. And the way that we access the favorites are, if I bring up the browser again, you may have noticed as I was looking at this before that there's a little gold star next to ligand preparation. This is available for any item within the task tool. For example, if I've gone into Glide and I see ligand docking, I can click on ligand docking. If this is something I do all the time, then just a single click means that now, if you look, this will always appear on the favorites toolbar. And you can see that ligand docking is exactly as if we'd accessed it from the browse tool, or in previous versions, exactly as if we'd accessed it from the menu. We think this is going to be really useful. If I decide that I don't want it, I can just right-click on there and delete that. It only deletes it from the measure. Now you notice that some things up here already that I hadn't had, that you don't have to take any operation to choose, populated by default. So we've chosen a few tools that we think are so commonly used. For example, protein preparation, the generation of surfaces, minimizing just directly in the workspace, doing alignments and measuring, which are really things that are done all the time. I'll come back to the favorites toolbar in a moment because I would like to illustrate some of the ways that the measurements work. But before I do that, I just want to talk about the overall task view again and just reiterate something that I mentioned before. In the past, some of you will remember that we had both a tools, a tasks, and a scripts menu. One point of confusion with Maestro 11 that we want to try and clear up is what happened to the scripts, or what happened to the tools? And the answer is they're all on the task menu. So we do still have a scripts menu. It's no longer populated with anything in a default installation. In the past, we had a whole series of scripts that we felt were useful. But after thinking about it, we've realized that this meant that things that were closely related were then scattered about the program. Some were in the scripts, some were in the tools, some were in the applications or tasks menu. What we've tried to do with the tasks tool is bring everything that might be related to a certain topic together. For example, let's look at docking. When we look at docking, we find at the top some standard tools that would have in the past been in the applications menu. Receptive grid generation, ligand docking. What we find also are some things that used to be in the scripts menu. These are actually Python scripts that do useful things related to docking. And so instead of having to hunt and peck between the menus, and in fact there were people that didn't even realize we could do some of these features, we've now got things that are related to docking all categorized in a single docking pane. So if I want to do Glide cross-docking, immediately I see it in the appropriate place instead of hidden in under some script submenu. We hope that even though this may have caused some some issue with people because they've gone ahead and expected to find things in the same place, we hope that people will get used to this very quickly and realize the sense of having related tasks categorized into related areas. One thing you will notice is that as I hover over these, and it's not a complete feature yet, but one of the other things we wanted to do is make it easier for people who are really starting right from the start to get some clues about what something like Glide ligand design does. And admittedly, the name gives a few clues, but this, if you see below, there's an expanded description, or lead optimization docking, for example. So most of these have a short text in the area below them, which gives some additional information about why you might want to bring up this panel. Just to reiterate, this task tool includes all the applications, most of the tools, and previously the Python scripts that we provide with the installation. It's a single place where it's sort of the go-to place for looking for all types of calculation engines within Maestro and many of the tools that operate or calculate things on the workspace. It's not, last week we looked at styling. Those tools are separate, so being able to style or change the view of the workspace still remains a separate tool, but anything that actually calculates or runs a job or makes, for example, measurements on the workspace, you would find in the task menu. It's searchable. You can browse it. We have a list of recent items, and we also have this favorites toolbar, which you can very easily configure yourself to have any sort of operations that you want. Okay, so one of the things that I want to illustrate specifically is one of the favorites tools, because it brings in a number of points that I think are worth making. It's not strictly related to the tasks, but I think it's worth talking about at this point. I've just brought in the structure. As you can see, you may remember that we talked about in the first session, we have these banners. I don't really have to dismiss that. If I keep working, it will go away eventually. So I've brought in a ligand receptor complex just for illustration purposes. You can see the banner's gone away. I just want to illustrate one of these tools within the favorites toolbar. If you remember from the first session or the last couple of sessions, one of the key features of Maestro is that essentially to do operations, you do a select them first. And in this case, I've just gone into residue mode, and I've clicked to select a residue. So now, you might remember from last week, I can go in and change the color of that and make it tube or ball and stick. So that's the way that you operate in Maestro. Generally, you make a selection, and then you operate on that selection. There are a few tools that work slightly differently, and let me give you a couple of examples. If, for example, I bring up, if we go back to Glide, if I bring up ligand docking, grid generation, well, one of the things that grid generation asks us to do is to identify the ligand. And again, this is something that we may refine a little bit in the future, because we do have pretty robust automatic ligand definition. But for now, we're asking users to define ligand. So this requires picking, which is not selection. And in order to tell you that, we have a little banner up here that just says pick an atom in the ligand. This reminds us that we're not actually selecting this point. We're not doing a workspace selection. We're doing it for a very specific task. I can close that panel, and basically I'm back to selection just as always was. So again, most of the time we will be doing atom selection. Very occasionally there'll be specific modes, and there'll be a banner for them. And one of the best examples, and probably one of the most commonly used ones in Maestro, is the measure tool. This is found on the favorites toolbar by default, and allows us to do a number of measurements within the workspace. For example, when you come up, you're in distance mode. And now you can see the picks are working slightly differently. They're not selecting anymore. They're actually directly going and making measurements. Once I've made the measurements, then I can do the sort of things that I was able to do in the past. I can actually, move. I can now do some cool stuff like being able to set the distance or adjust it. And if I, for example, want to move the label around, I can reposition it if you're doing a presentation. And if I'm happy with that, I can just say OK. And again, we were having banners all the time for tasks that are specific to specific modes. Let me just go over that again with a different example. So, for example, if I want to measure a dihedral, if I'm interested in the, how flat is this ring, then I can select 4 atoms, and I see, it's pretty close to 0. Same tools apply. I'm just going to right-click on that measurement, and I can do various interesting things at that point. Let me do another perhaps even more interesting one on the side pane. And now at this point, I can go and say, I missed it. Unfortunately, my mouse is sticking on its mouse pad, so it's not actually picking that up very well. But it's really now going totally crazy. Anyway, you can see that basically I'll be able to click on this measurement, and okay, there we go. And then say if I want to adjust the dihedral, I can go into a dihedral adjustment mode, and just use my normal controls for adjusting the dihedral once I'm happy with that. So one more thing about measurements before I go. There is a little ruler down here, and you see I can turn on the measurements on and off at the time, and I can see the traditional table of them. So if you really want some additional information about your measurements, particularly dihedrals is kind of interesting because we actually provide the residue name and we try and figure out the PDB atom names as well. There's also some additional tools here. I can right click on this, on any of these to calculate property. For example, if I have a series of conformers, this is one thing that is a little bit of a hidden feature at the moment. One thing it's possible to do is if you have in the project a whole series of conformers with the same atom numbering, then you can bring one of them into the workspace and you can calculate property, which actually means, add for all the structures in the project the same measurement, so go ahead and automatically do it. People are often interested in that as an atom property. I can also, fit to workspace if I want to just zoom in on that particular measurement. And there's also a way here to enter the measurements mode at the same time. So I can, if I'm interested in measuring distances, I can do that. So that's really all about distances and measuring. I just used that as an example of one of the tools. It's the sort of quantitative thing, like I say, that you should expect to find in the task menu. And again, the rule is, if it's going to produce a number, then generally it's in the task menu. And measurements is one of those tools and tasks that we have grouped together with a whole range of other. If you look, we had a category at the start, which is just called Workspace Tools. And so many of the things that are sort of fundamental stuff that you might want to do within Maestro are actually in this Workspace Tools here. And again, the emphasis is on things that actually produce numbers or produce some, scientifically valid change to the workspace, such as minimizing. So that's our introduction to the tasks tool. I think, Dan, if there's any questions, now would be a good time perhaps to take them.